to have a very, very devoted group of researchers who collaborate with teachers in translanguaging research and practice. So without further delay, I'd like to hand over to Mariana and Zhongfang. So over to you, Mariana, to introduce your work and your group.
Okay, thank you very much, Angel. I am very happy to be here today with my fellow researchers. And I would just, before I begin explaining what we're going to talk about today, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm currently on the unceded lands of the Boon Wurrung people and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and also extend those respects to the elders on any country that you may be situated today. So we're very happy today to be talking about what is very dear to our hearts, teacher-researcher collaboration in translanguaging research and practice. And this seminar is really born of a meeting between Zhongfang and I initially. So Zhongfang very kindly spoke to me on leveraging that. And while we were talking, I realised just how much we had in common in terms of what our research interests were and the kinds of issues that we faced in our research around teacher-researcher collaboration. So we invited other people to you soon who these people are. Unfortunately, we couldn't all be here today because of different time constraints. So the way that we're going to do this is Zhongfang and I are going to speak first, and then I will introduce the other speakers who have very kindly done a pre-recorded video for this session, and I will explain a little bit more as we go. So let's begin. So the contexts today, the first context that I will be talking about is Australia, and then we will go to the US, then we will go to South Africa, and then Sweden. Okay, so let's start with Australia. Let's see if I can do this. And okay, so I am going to be talking about Australia and Victoria in particular. And what we are really interested in is how we collaborate, so how researchers and teachers collaborate and the different affordances, the different constraints with this collaboration. So I'll begin talking about my collaboration with teachers, but as a researcher, I think it's very important that I start with talking about my own positioning and my own interests in this. So I did come through a teaching background. I'm secondary trained in teaching English to speakers of other languages and also Japanese. So I've mainly taught TESOL, but I also taught Japanese in Australia too. So one other thing that I feel like I should mention, which is very important to my research, is that in my life, in my daily life, I live in English and Spanish. So I've really married into Spanish. So I think about home language maintenance a lot too in my work. So my role that I see with my collaboration with teachers is really what I want to do is sit side by side with them and problem solve with them. So I want to understand how ideas in scholarship can be, that they can pick up those ideas and run with those ideas. And I don't know the answers necessarily. I just really want to help them think about the questions and offer a bigger picture as well. So this does usually begin with needing to explain ideas as well, and we do position what we do as professional learning, and then we build a research component into this. In Australia, we have a linguistically diverse population. About a quarter of the population use another language at home. We do have institutional attempts to include the language knowledge of students in the domain of TESOL. This, for example, in my state of Victoria, comes under the idea of plurilingual awareness in the English as an additional language curriculum. What I found in my own research is that there's generally a positive attitude towards students' home languages, but teachers do continue to use monolingual teaching practices in mainstream settings. But in these settings, we do, as I mentioned before, we do have a lot of diversity. So what is often hidden in statistics, like this is how many people speak another language at home, is the great range of abilities that kids come to class with. In terms of oral communication, they might have receptive abilities, productive abilities, all sorts of different levels of confidence. The same with reading and writing in home languages. And this really does affect how teachers can bring home languages into the class. We have English as an additional language students who are identified as needing help, needing support with their English, and we have monolinguals in English as well. So this is the situation. And these are really how I was thinking about the ideological and implementational spaces for research. This is something that our group was really trying to think what's similar and what's different between different contexts. So Michael Klein, 20 years ago, said that Australia was aggressively monolingual. This is something that I often say in frustration, but I would say it's more a complacency because of English being a lingua franca in the world and other languages really being quite invisible in strange ways, because Australia is home to a great number of languages and people speaking different languages. We do recognise in Australia that EAL students need language support. This is systemic, so we try to help EAL students in systemic ways. We do see extended linguistic repertoire as part of this support now. So the plurilingual awareness really comes in thinking about how to help EAL students learn English. And I think this is also very important, the way that language is not really considered important, or it's not really high stakes. We have approximately 15% of students annually choosing to continue when language becomes an elective in senior secondary. So this is when students are studying language at school. It's usually compulsory in the middle years and often compulsory in primary as well. But when students can choose, they often opt out. So what's appealing to me about translanguaging theory? This was another question that we were asking ourselves. So what I'm really trying to do is help teachers think about language differently, because the way that language is positioned in outside society, it can be very difficult to push against and difficult then to use language effectively for learning. So I think that Yildiz in this first block here put it very well when she was talking about the post-monolingualism. So here we see that language is clearly a demarcated entity that has a name, is countable, and is the property of the group that speaks it, while also revealing that group's idiosyncrasies. So then we apply this to multilingualism, and then people think, oh, but I can't bring other languages into the classroom because I don't know them, and this is a bit of an issue. So I think that Bainham and Lee said it really well, that translanguaging aspires to be nowhere in particular, not unlike an itinerant traveller dwelling in the present moment, always on the move, but without a fixed schedule or destination. Once fossilisation happens, translanguaging vaporises. So this is a really useful way of thinking about language in relation to learning. I think anyway, and in my own research, this is how I use it. And finally, I do think too in Australia, because of our complacency towards other languages, that it's very important to position bilingual students as the norm in the classroom. At the moment, it's their peripheral, and monolingualism is the norm. So really trying to break that down using translanguaging. So finally, mixing research with teaching, which was the final question that we were asking ourselves. How do we do this? What we try to do is link in with what education bodies want, and what they want is to help EAL students learn English. So we link into that and we try to expand that. So, for example, I'm very interested in home language maintenance and helping teachers understand how they can help parents with language at home, valuing languages at home. and we produce resources for teachers, and we also try to put into the resources our wider objective. And we embed data collection in professional learning, so we try not to ask the teachers to do anything extra. One thing that is very difficult, at least for me, in the research is thinking about the messiness, and really, because I try to do design-based research, accepting that the amount of iterations that I would want in a project may not happen, and I need to do it over, I need to do it over different projects. And finally, what I realised too is that developing theory can come from constraint as much as opportunity. So thinking about translanguaging in the Australian context has helped me to try to work out how to develop the theory more. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Let's see, stop the share.
Thank you. So, would you introduce Zhongfeng to us? Yes.
Okay, thanks, Angel. Okay, Zhongfeng, are you happy to speak next?
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Marian. And hi, everybody. So as Marian said, we are a group of passionate researchers, teacher researchers, who are really passionate about promoting translanguaging through teacher-researcher collaboration, right? So I personally really see this as one way to sustain translanguaging theory and refine translanguaging theory through this iterative cycles through co-learning, co-designing with teachers. So now I'm going to invite you all to join me to the US context. I'm going to share a little bit more about what I learned from my teacher-researcher collaboration journey based in the US context. So let me start sharing. Okay, you all can see it, right? Yeah. Okay, so first I just want to share my journey from classroom teacher to collaborative researcher. So I am a multilingual speaker.
Sorry, Zhongfeng, I don't think we can see.
You want to show your PowerPoint again? We only see you, but not the PowerPoint.
Okay,
It showed for a split second and then it's gone. So I don't know why. Yeah. Now it is showing, yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it full screen.
Oh, but then it is gone again. It's gone again. It shows for a split second and then it's gone. Now it is showing, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And it's gone. I don't know what happened.
Okay, let me try it again. Sorry. I think it's better that I don't show the full screen, because whenever I do the full screen,
the full
it
screen
disappears.
makes it go away.
Yeah, so let me just, I'm gonna reshare. Okay. So I will just keep it this way. You can see it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So technology is not always my best friend, as you can see. So I'm going to talk about what I learned from the US context based on my research with teachers. So I'm going to start with sharing a little bit about my journey from classroom teacher to collaborative researcher. So I'm a multilingual speaker of Mandarin, English, and Cantonese. And before I became a researcher, I was a teacher. I was an English and Mandarin teacher. I had transnational teaching experiences in China, Cambodia, and US. So really my teaching philosophy has been really informed by my own transnational multilingual background, because supporting multilingual students in a more humanizing, equitable, and inclusive way has always been the question that I have, and including sort of reflecting of my own language learning journey. And then really when I got in my PhD program, I encountered this concept of translanguaging. I think I immediately connected with this concept because I really see myself in translanguaging. Translanguaging is who I am. It really captures my daily language practices with my own communities. And also really inspired by my former professor, especially Dr. Maria Brisk, who's now retired from Boston College. I really see the power of she she had this over 10 years, more than a decade, long-term research collaboration with a local school. And I see the power of teacher-researcher collaboration in promoting equitable linguistic environment for multilingual students. So in my dissertation, I decided to work with a Chinese immersion teacher to co-design a translanguaging pedagogy in a grade 3 classrooms. So really in my dissertation, so I really used participatory design research to study what translanguaging pedagogy could look like in a Chinese immersion context through iterative participatory cycle design. And after that, I further expanded my research partnerships, continuing with Chinese immersion teachers, but also with ESL teachers, English language arts teachers across different states to further promote translanguaging pedagogies in different K through 12 contexts. And now I'm also starting thinking I need to further develop these partnerships, not just with teachers, but also with families and community members. And what would that will look like as a more holistic teacher, researcher, family, community partnership would look like. So I think throughout the process, definitely the context, the ideological space that I'm navigating is, even though US has always been a multilingual country, right? Multilingual is the reality in this country. However, English dominant monolingual ideology continue to persist throughout all US classrooms. So doing translanguaging means challenging these dominant ideologies. And also throughout this process, I am very fortunate to continue to build a wider network with like-minded colleagues through collaborations, presentations, volumes, special issues, right? And this is what led to us, right? We started talking, and now we have this group with other international researchers to continue to discuss these issues. So why I'm really interested in translanguaging, right? So why translanguaging? I think there are many, many different reasons, right? So here I will just highlight a few of them. I think I really agree with translanguaging promoting this holistic view of bilingualism, seeing multilingual learners from this asset-oriented, asset-based orientation, right? Students draw from their one linguistic repertoire, not separate languages. Translanguaging also function as a transformative pedagogy, right? It helps teachers to see language learning. The goals of language learning is also tied to individuals' identity, emotion, and social justice issues, not just about you need to speak like a native speaker, right? That is not the goal of language learning. And also, I think it encourages teachers to see themselves not only as teachers of a certain language. Actually, they are teachers of communication. Encourage students to engage in meaning making should be the purpose. And also, it encourages mutual learning. Teachers could reflect on their language ideology throughout the process. I think researchers, we understand the better about the opportunities and challenges in this practice. And of course, it offers a shared framework to co-design multilingual lessons that honor students' voices. So why teacher-researcher collaboration, right? Because I think the field continues to grapple with this research practice divide in applied linguistics. Even though I think as researchers, we are really passionate about translanguaging theory and pedagogies, practitioners continue to have these different type of questions, right? How I can do translanguaging? How can I translate this theory into practices? I think by bringing both parties together, it can really help create a sustainable and equitable praxis that bridges theory and classroom realities. So I really see this as a one promising way to advance translanguaging pedagogies. It provides mutual support. Researchers can come to the classroom to share best practices and co-creating new ones with teachers. And also it positions teachers as experts and really value their deep contextual knowledge as well. So this kind of collaboration really transformed research from being about teachers to being with teachers, aiming to foster innovation, reflection, and justice-oriented change. And I really love this quote from Garcia et al. 2020 2021, this article. I think in this quote, they really highlight the power of collaboration and why this matters, right? So they said it is this reshaping of theory through practice and through continuing collaborations with researchers and teacher educators that pushes the theory forward and creates more dynamic, sustaining, and equitable learning environments for racialized bilingual students. Right. So through teacher research collaboration, this is also a productive way to reshape theory, to test the theory into practice. And I think, so methodologically, what does this look like, right? So I think we should really ground ourselves in critical, participatory, and community-based research traditions. These include, but not limited to, design-based and community-based research, social design experiments, and particular indigenous methodologies, right? To really prioritize the community's knowledge systems. We really value their ways of knowing, thinking, and being. I think doing teacher research collaboration also aligns perfectly with the social justice aims of translanguaging pedagogies, because we aim to foster an equitable and bidirectional partnerships between both parties, attend to the nuanced needs, knowledge, and aspirations of the participating communities. And through this, we aim to transform educational practice from within. In one of my earliest articles, so my dear colleague Leah Shepherd-Carey, as you can see the picture of us there. So we published an article. So we proposed this framework, right, called co-stance, co-design, and co-shifts framework to really sort of like visualize this process of teacher researcher collaboration. And this is also adapted from the Garcia et al. 2017 stance design and shifts framework, right? They talking about teachers, in order for teachers to take up translanguaging pedagogies, their belief systems, their intentional design in curriculum and instruction, and their constant shifts to address students' needs, right, in the classroom. So we think when both parties work together, we need to emphasize a co-stance, co-design, and co-shifts, right, to really see the collective collaboration and their dynamic shifting roles between teachers and researchers. Researchers can be teachers, teachers can be researchers, right? There shouldn't be a boundary between these two, or nor hierarchy among these two parties. And it also views theory, practice, and research as interconnected and mutually shaping. It frames collaboration as a dynamic process of negotiating co-stances, developing co-designs, and making co-shifts to meet students' needs. And we also see these three elements, they are interacting with each other as iterative and interdependent, continuously influencing one another within this dynamic, complex teacher-researcher partnerships. So if you're interested to know more about the definitions of each dimension, in that article, we actually further unpack what do we mean by co-stance, co-design, and co-shifts. So our goal is to really provide a heuristic for not only building equitable partnerships, but also potentially examining how partnerships can be improved, right? Like, for example, how can teachers research foster co-stance, right? And what co-design will look like differently in different contexts, and how we navigate co-shifts together throughout this process. And in this picture, we also collaborate with the artist, Martha, also to visualize this messy process, right? I think everybody would agree that teacher-researcher collaboration is not going to be a smooth journey, right? It's going to be messy, it's iterative. There will be difficult dialogues, conversations involved with both parties, because researchers, teachers may not necessarily come from the same stance, right? Like we come together, need to have some important, difficult conversations to discuss what translanguaging is. And a lot of times we also need to sort of have conversations about different myths surrounding translanguaging, right? And what it will look like in classrooms. So you can see in this picture, of course, it's open to interpretation, right? So I'm just gonna share our original sort of like conceptualization of this painting, this beautiful painting. So in the middle, you can see the boxes, right? We visualize that as the monolingual structures that we're trying to break down, that we're trying to push the boundaries, right? And you can see both hands representing the two parties trying to work together toward the same direction, try to break down the monolingual structures. And once we try to break down, it opens us more possibilities. It reimagines our classrooms. And that's why you see rainbows flying out of the book. You see the paper airplanes, right, flying in the sky, right? It really allows students to be who they are. They can bring their full linguistic and semiotic resources in this knowledge co-making space. And let's meet the artist. So I was also really fortunate to meet Martha in person in 2023 in New Mexico at a conference, La Cosecha. And so throughout the years, I'm really proud of is Leah and we edited this volume called Reimagining Translanguaging Pedagogies through Teacher-Researcher Collaboration. So if you're interested, you can check out this book. And in this book, we actually include many different contexts and countries and share their stories of teacher-researcher coming together to grapple with translanguaging pedagogies in different contexts and also in different content areas. And as I said, this was not a smooth journey, right? There were so many constraints during the teacher-researcher collaboration. So here I summarize some constraints based on my experience working with the teachers. Time is always the enemy, workload, pressures. So teachers are already stretched thin with planning, grading, and testing demands, leaving little time for co-design and reflection. And the other one definitely come from the institutional, the macro level constraints, the policy, the English-only mandates in dual language immersion programs. They still function under this parallel monolingualism model, right? Like this target language only policy and standardized testing limit ideological and implementational space. Teachers' buy-in is also uneven, and their readiness is also different. Some of them, they really feel uncertain or even feel there's internal fear of doing translanguaging in their classroom. They also have pushback. They also fear pushback from administrators and even parents a lot of times. And also this power dynamics that we cannot ignore when teacher researchers coming together, right? Because traditionally researchers always coming into the classroom with more power, right? Like so throughout this process, I think it is very important that we continue to have these reflexive and reflective dialogues to make sure we position this framework, we position our partnerships in a more equitable way. We need to value teachers, their local expertise. And changing school leadership or staffing can often disrupt these long-term partnerships also. And also, translanguaging, they also unfold unpredictably, right? Implementation really follows the linear research plans. A lot of times, we also need to be flexible and adjust our designs throughout this co-design process. And lastly, I just want to share some lessons that I learned from collaborating with teachers. And also this will serve as a response, right, to those, how we really grapple with those constraints, right? I think it is important that building trusting relationships grounded in respect and shared purpose. I see this as the foundation of any relationship, I would say, right? Like the teacher-researcher collaborations and teacher-researcher family community partnerships, right? It is important that we have a trusting base among each other. And this takes time, right? Like to build trusting relationship. Like what I can share from my journey is I started my collaboration first as a volunteer teacher in the classroom before I officially working with the teacher for this research project. I think that really helped us build a trusting partnerships. Also, it is important to create a win-win situation for both parties with clear co-negotiated goals. I think that's important. Not just what you want to study, but also what you can bring to benefit the classroom, to benefit the multilingual learners. Keep an open and evolving mindset. That's also important. Let beliefs and practices grow together, right? I think both parties need to stay open-minded, and that's also one of the important foundations. Stay mindful of power dynamics and honor teachers' expertise. Recognize contextual constraints while also finding creative openings. Begin with small translanguaging steps and celebrate gradual shifts, right? And also, like what I mentioned, debunk translanguaging myth. Translanguaging is not chaotic, not unstructured, right? It is important that we help teachers understand it needs to be designed with purposeful and strategic mindset. And also help teachers to recognize their own translanguaging moves. A lot of times, right, teachers, they think, oh, translanguaging is far away from me. Actually help them realize you're already doing translanguaging all the time, right? And ask them to think about their own language learning journey and think about the moves that they already engaged in their classrooms. And we can start from there. And also, it is important to normalize confusion, reversion, and productive messiness, right? A lot of times you may feel stuck at certain point, right? Like sort of like, oh, I really don't, this has nowhere to go, right? But this is part of the process of teacher research collaboration. It is important to accept that this is all part of the process. And these opportunity, these sort of like, these spaces serve further opportunities for growth, right? So maintain open and consistent communication, engage in reflective and reflexive inquiry, be flexible and embrace ambiguity as a sign of authentic change. It's okay to not to have an answer at that particular moment, right? And you just continue with your research journey. And I think use co-stance, co-design, and co-shifts as this guiding principle for sustainable collaboration. So thank you all for your listening. I hope this is helpful, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation after this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Angel. Angel, could I speak? Would you like to say something, or shall I
Yes,
just continue?
Marianne, are you going to show some of the videos from your teammates? Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, thank you, Shankang. It's always fascinating to hear what you're doing. And I now would like to go to our colleagues who were in a time zone that was just really, really hard to include them in real time for this seminar. So our first colleague is Dr. Robin Tyler. She's from the University of Western Cape in South Africa, and she has got a wonderful pre-recorded video, which I'm going to show you now. And okay, that's okay? That's visible. And I'll play. Wait a second.
Good day, everyone. My name is Robin Tyler, and I'm very happy to be participating in this seminar. I'm a senior researcher at the Centre for Multilingualism and Diversities Research at the University of the Western Cape in Cape Town, South Africa. I will read my presentation as we have a strict time limit. I started my working life as a high school English teacher. It was in this context that the first research questions I had about the role of language in learning started to nag at me. I started to explore postgraduate research in language in education in 2008. Every empirical study I've undertaken since then has been with teachers in schools. I've worked with teachers in both elite and low SES schools in the Western Cape province. Today, my presentation will focus on low SES, no-fee state-funded schools, which makes up roughly 75% of South African public schools, and have been the sites for most of my research to date, which is ethnographic and collaborative in nature. So the ideological and implementational spaces of my research To start, the pictures that you see on the slide are taken from recent news and Facebook pages about two of the public schools I have worked in Cape Town. The most important thing to say about the ideological and implementational spaces in which I do my work is that the South African schooling system is marked by massive inequality along race and class lines. I am white and the teachers I work with are black. I speak mostly English day to day, and the teachers speak mostly isiXhosa day to day. In South Africa, race is a powerful social construction which remains a proxy for many other life-determining factors. 16 racially divided education departments merged in 1994 after democracy to administer school-level education. Teachers in the system had vastly different levels of education and language backgrounds, but were immediately expected to deliver the same curriculum and assessment standards. The asymmetry between myself and the teachers I work with in terms of education background, linguistic repertoire, and status is ever present in my work and is a potential source of discomfort for myself and the teachers, despite the fact that I can converse socially in isiXhosa. The second notable characteristic of our schooling system is that it has carried a paternalistic essence from colonial and apartheid bureaucratic traditions. Teachers are told what to do and are treated as implementers rather than with participatory agency. Research is generally not well understood in schools, and researchers can often be equated with the old school inspectors holding punitive power. Centralized and standardized testing enforces compliance rather than professional growth, reducing teacher autonomy and positioning schools as instruments of state targets. And this can lead to teachers feeling under duress by researchers as just another official in the school. The third characteristic is that language policy in schooling in South Africa is a tool of both maintaining racialized power structures and, in rare cases, transforming these. The piece on the left-hand side of the screen is an article written in The Conversation which describes this. Bilingual Afrikaans and English schooling has been available and supported for over a century. But for as long, there's been strong resistance to official bilingual education in English and African languages, although teachers have been smuggling in the vernacular, as a teacher in Margie Probin's 2009 study said. Despite a national language and education policy which is enabling of multilingualism, schools are individually responsible for deciding the language of instruction, and English has become entrenched from the 4th year in most schools. We are poised at the beginning of change, however, with the introduction of mother tongue-based bilingual education in grade 4 maths and science from this year for all African language speakers. However, as described in my paper with Carolyn McKinney on the right-hand side of the slide, a text frontier still needs to be breached in the use of African languages in written form. And so that is a significant ideological constraint on my research. And then last, access to schools for my research is relatively easy. We apply to the Provincial Education Department for permission once we have university ethical clearance. But gaining access to teachers is less easy unless they are already students in one of my classes, but this has not generally been the case. So I have relied on contacts from my teaching days or other connections to schools and teachers. The teachers I work with have tough working conditions, very little, if any, non-contact time. Schools set in unstable or unsafe areas, so staff leave the premises promptly after school. Much of my research has been classroom discourse analysis, so I must be in the classroom, which is extra demanding for teachers, especially in a paternalistic system, as they can feel judged. It also places strain on them due to an expectation that they perform in English. Teachers report only teaching monolingually in English when departmental officials or other researchers, other official types, when they visit. So why does translanguaging as a concept appeal in my work with teachers? South African teachers are already familiar with the term code switching, but in our context, it is a highly stigmatized term and denotes only switching from the sanctioned monolingual English to the prohibited African language to help children understand, and so it's considered a necessary evil. Translanguaging provides an alternative term for a very similar, at least oral, practice, to describe and work with practice with teachers without the burden of the stigma. And then secondly, as we all know, translanguaging research is very trendy internationally, so it's easy to position our teachers as already being well versed in cutting-edge pedagogical practice and to point them to international studies which hold currency in South Africa. And even to tell them, and more importantly, education officials, that the practice of South African teachers is admired by linguists globally. From there, we can move from oral into the more ideologically challenging translanguaging studies using African languages. And lastly, the inclusion of multimodal meaning making in the concept of translanguaging means that we can position the use of African languages or even English as one more pedagogical tool and meaning-making tool to help children learn. And therefore, this reduces the exceptionality of African languages as something exotic to be used for learning. And then finally, to discuss how I address constraints and messiness in the collaborative work with teachers. Here are some learnings along the way. Firstly, it's helpful to work in multilingual and multiracial teams in our context, being aware of different linguistic profiles and experiences in education, and then to highlight resources in African languages and making sure that we acknowledge different team players in terms of seniority in the research team. Secondly, to find opportunities to surface the asymmetries between myself and teachers, and where misunderstandings occur, which they do, to apologize for these, and to also note what works for teachers in terms of things like communication. A very specific and practical issue is how to use WhatsApp. With our data bundles in South Africa, WhatsApp calls are very expensive, but voice notes are not as expensive. So to use voice notes as a way of communicating with teachers is useful. Thirdly, to draw on my experience of teaching, to empathize with teachers when things are tough. Fourthly, to give teachers resources where I can in a spirit of reciprocity. They are supporting my career by being involved in collaborative research. I wouldn't be able to publish what I do without their consent and their participation. So in the spirit of reciprocity, I try to give teachers learning and teaching resources where I can. Fifthly, just to respect their time, keep meetings very, and also to take on another role in the school, which helps to humanize me as a researcher. So I've been an extra English teacher, an isiXhosa learner, a science club facilitator, a teacher's assistant, different things in different schools to make me just seem more relatable and to narrow the gap between myself and teachers and other adults in the school as well. And then lastly, to try to bring teachers into the academic space. So not only go into their space in schools, but to bring them into my space in the university through co-presenting at conferences, which you can see on the slide, and co-publishing, which I've started to do with teachers as well. So in closing, I have certainly made many mistakes working with teachers, and it's not easy working across the domains of higher and secondary education. But I learn in each project, and it is always a privilege working with teachers and through them with children in our schools. And I would like to thank the teachers who co-created this work with me, and in particular to mention Nosimo Nzotyana, Nkolisi Mbobo, and Sinazo Bonde. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. So Mariana, that's a very exciting work you're doing. You still have one more sharing from a colleague, a video.
We do. We have one more to share. So that was, I thought extremely thought-provoking from Robin, from her context. And the last one, let me just get it up now, is Associate Professor Bethan Palsrud from Sweden. And I'll just have to stop. Sorry, I'm just organising the video now. And she's... Oh, right. I'm ready. So, sorry, Bethan. I'm introducing you about 3 different times here. Very interesting work that she's doing in Sweden. So I will let her speak to it now. And share.
Thank you for coming to this seminar. My name is Bethan Palsrud. I'm a senior lecturer of English at Language Education and an associate professor of English in the Department of Teaching and Learning at Stockholm University. In this video, I'm going to briefly present the current Swedish research context regarding translanguaging in education, focusing on how teachers may or may not be prepared for working with the linguistically diverse classrooms of the Swedish school today. First, an overview of the linguistic context. There's no official language in Sweden. Rather, we have a principal language, as well as 5 official minority languages and Swedish Sign Language. The Language Act states an intention to both protect the Swedish language and the linguistic diversity in Sweden. Furthermore, every resident in Sweden should be ensured the opportunity to learn Swedish and to develop and use their mother tongue, no matter what it is. We have no official statistics on languages spoken. Due to mother tongue support in schools, however, we do know that Arabic and Finnish are the most common languages spoken after Swedish. We also know that about 140 named languages are spoken by students in the Swedish school, with about 29% of the school population speaking a language other than Swedish at home. Translanguaging, or transspråkande in Swedish, is a concept that has increasingly been a key component of research in this multilingual context for the last 15 years. In 2015, Sweden hosted the first ever international conference focused specifically on translanguaging, followed by 3 more international conferences bringing scholars together from around the globe. 2 of these conferences resulted in anthologies. Swedish researchers have also published 2 more volumes on translanguaging pedagogies in Sweden. Early translanguaging research in Swedish classrooms focused on observation and interview studies. For example, in both Jeanette Toth's doctoral thesis from 2018 and my own thesis from 2014, we observed teachers and students in our studies engaging in spontaneous and planned translanguaging practices. Translanguaging research in Sweden quickly expanded to other arenas, including studies of deaf students in the science classroom, multilingual study guidance support in Sweden and Australia, third language writing in Spanish in Sweden, and children in super diverse preschools. These are all examples of PhD research on translanguaging from Stockholm University. Moving beyond observations and interviews, researchers have, for example, worked with municipalities to collaborate with teachers in developing translanguaging pedagogies in compulsory schools, such as the in-service teacher training project with teachers led by the National Center for Swedish as a Second Language. In a seminal example of collaborative research, Swedish researchers investigated language practices in lower secondary English classrooms. Their research project, Multilingual Spaces, was conducted in collaboration with 6 English teachers at 4 different schools in Sweden. Despite the spread of translanguaging research in educational spheres in Sweden, teacher education has remained monolingually oriented. In our chapter in this anthology on preparing teachers to work with multilingual learners, my colleague Adrian Lundberg and I concluded that despite official measures addressing multilingualism in policy, there were no universally required courses or modules on the national level to prepare pre-service primary teachers to work with multilingualism in their daily teaching. Our conclusions were that the Swedish language is seen as synonymous with language, issues of multilingualism are mainly found in Swedish or Swedish as a second language courses, and that the concept of multilingualism is often relegated to migration-induced multilingualism. More recently, Yasmin Bylund and Marcus Barnby investigated courses in Swedish, English, and mathematics in primary teacher education, finding that perspectives on multilingualism were still most prominent in the Swedish language courses. Their results show that the analyzed syllabi lack a common policy regarding the role multilingualism plays in Swedish teacher education, and they concluded that to be able to include and benefit from multilingualism as a resource nationally, a coordinated strategy is required. In response to the research indicating a lack of preparation for the multilingual realities of the Swedish school, my colleague Parvin Katasi and I introduced translanguaging pedagogy to our teacher education courses, bringing in literature such as studies by Ofelia Garcia and teaching our students about stance, design, and shift. The pre-service teachers learned about the multilingual stance as well as the pedagogical translanguaging. We have conducted research on this. The pre-service teachers prepared lesson plans that were 5-week teaching units focusing on process writing, with one section addressing multilingual perspectives. We analyzed 42 of these lesson plans, and we did this in Atlas TI, focusing on language orientations. We used an ecological perspective in the study, considering contextual affordances and constraints for lesson planning. Affordances included the syllabi for English and for mother tongue instruction, and the stipulations of the Language Act. The national syllabus for English teaching shall give pupils the opportunities to develop plurilingualism. The mother tongue instruction syllabus states that access to one's mother tongue facilitates language development and learning in different fields. And the Language Act states that all residents of Sweden are to be given the opportunity to learn and develop languages, to develop and learn Swedish, to develop and use the mother tongue and the national minority languages, and to be given the opportunity to learn foreign languages. Constraints include the attitudes towards multilingualism, including those of teacher educators and working teachers, as seen in an interview study I conducted with Päivi Juvonen and Andrea Schally. Teacher educators and in-service teachers make clear the role of Swedish as the only legitimate language for learning in teacher education and school, in adherence to a monolingual mindset. In this study, pre-service teachers also stated their frustration over a lack of preparation for working with linguistic diversity. As one said, "The knowledge I have from my university about multilingualism hasn't helped me much." This was corroborated by my study of teacher education with Adrian Lundberg. Very briefly, in our study of the lesson plans, we coded 41 language orientations across the 42, with most revealing that the pre-service teachers had adopted a language as a resource orientation in their planning. Here is one pre-service teacher's planning that reflected a language as resource orientation. She said, "What I can do is reassure the pupils that it is okay to use translanguaging in the classroom. Translanguaging means that the pupils can all use all their language knowledge when working and communicating." Here's another pre-service teacher's planning that reveals how new literature and new ideas can help teachers move from theory to practice. She said, "I also got some new ideas on how I can encourage my use different languages. The resource I appreciate the most is Garcia and Seltzer. The authors claim that translanguaging is a way to use your former language knowledge to develop a new one. A translanguaging pedagogy is knowing that a pupil's former linguistic repertoire is not an obstacle. It is a tool for development. I want to use translanguaging pedagogy and create a translanguaging space in my classroom." Our study confirmed that it is possible to incorporate explicit teaching about translanguaging and a multilingual stance in teacher education. This is both appealing and crucial given the linguistic diversity of Sweden today. To conclude, Both ideological and implementational spaces for translanguaging in the Swedish context are clear, as is seen in the affordances offered by national policy and solid research. We have possibilities in the Swedish context with the increasing number of classroom studies, as well as studies of translanguaging pedagogy involving working teachers. We also see the promise of including translanguaging pedagogy in pre-service training. The challenge is for us to now ensure that the research, the teacher collaborations, and teacher education do not remain isolated from one another. Thank you for listening. Please do contact me if you have any questions or would like to see the references cited in the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for very stimulating presentations. We see both the affordances and the constraints and in different contexts. So we want to open up the floor for discussion and questions. I think Phoebe has already got some questions that you would like to ask. So hand over to Phoebe.
Yeah, morning, and thank you for staying with us. It's very early in Hong Kong, but maybe very late in your time zone. So I love all the examples given from your teamwork, and I have some basic question based on my experience as a teacher and researcher in Hong Kong or maybe in Asian regions. You know that because I'm working for higher education, and a lot of us, after struggling with the public exam and also secondary school education in Hong Kong, we want to fight for like academic success. And in a lot of ideological framing in Asia, we believe that if my English is good, it means that I'm also academically relatively stronger than my peers or something. So if I propose translanguaging as a teacher, or maybe I try to talk to the parents, then they may think that maybe it's because of the teacher's incapabilities that she or he cannot train my kid or my son or daughter to use English only to be excellent academically, or use English to learn English. How may I motivate their dynamics? Because I know one of the speakers already addressed the concern of paternalism, right? The idea that parent mindset govern their educational framework and system. So how may I change this kind of dynamics? It's even around me in higher education, because a lot of colleagues and students are expecting English-only environments to nurture their academic success. So how may we bridge collaboration between teacher and researcher if the atmosphere is not so catering? That's the questions and struggle in my mind. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to have a go? I have something. I mean, I do actually have something that I'd like to say, a little plug for someone who, Dan Shao, who is at Monash University, who wrote a blog entry for leveraging languages for learning, and he called it "Who Gets to Be Legitimate in the English Classroom: A View from the Inside," and he was talking about his experiences as an educator and parents thinking that it wasn't the right thing to do when he was using Chinese in a classroom as well as English, that kind of thing. So just a quick shout out to Dan. It's difficult. I don't know, before I respond, Xiangfang, do you want to say anything to this? Because this is...
No, go ahead. Yeah, I can go after. Yeah.
Probably you know the context more than I do. I think it's hard. I mean, in the Australian context, it's similar in the sense that the space, the implementational space, really is around getting English as an additional language students speaking English faster. Like it's all about English, and we need to kind of link it to that and then try to work out how to expand on that. But my understanding, and it was a hypothesis, but I can see in my own work that it's true, is that you can actually talk to teachers about the fact that it's going to help that, and then show them how. And I think it's really important to include parents. I think a question that people often have is about parents. Well, they're an important factor, but they need to be included. They need to understand what you're doing, like what the teachers are doing. And if they understand that, oh, okay, so yeah, so you're helping, because often parents really want that for their kids as well. Yeah, they want that status for their kids, or in Australia, they want their kids to be really successful with English, that they understand that you're not trying to diminish that in any way. And in fact, it will help. But then you have to show how. And so what I've been trying to do, or what we try to do, is collect evidence for that. And then we can show, well, look, this is, this is how it happens. This is how people actually improve their English. It's not getting in the way of English at all.
Yeah, I think what you just said, I definitely second that. I think it is important that we reframe the conversation with parents. Translanguaging is not Translanguaging is not the source to learning English. Translanguaging is actually helping them learn English in a stronger way. And actually, translanguaging supports all languages, the development of all languages, right? It's even better to just develop their English, right? So I think it is important that you reframe the conversation, right? Translanguaging not only helps English language learning, first you relieve the parents' concern, right? But also supports their bi and multilingual development. I think in that way, sort of like, and also, of course, you need to show evidence, right? Like we need to have these conversations with parents, letting them know a lot of times, actually, these concerns are more about ideological concerns without any empirical support. Right? So what you can say as teachers, you can actually have a conversation with parents. There has never been any empirical research supporting English only immersion models could help students learn English faster and better, right? So that just zero, empirical evidence supporting this. And actually a lot of research actually showing multilingual teaching pedagogies support students develop their second language better, and also foster their identity, their sense of belonging, right? I think also it's important to talk about learning language is never just about learning language, right? It's about, build who you are, what kind of person you want to be, right? Become a global citizen, and also develop your intercultural competence, knowing yourself in a positive way, right? Not just becoming another monolingual speaker, right? So trying to foster these positive mindsets, I think that's important. So I think having these conversations, showing evidence, and reframe the conversation could help parents to understand or to unlearn these monolingual ideologies. Yeah.
Right. I think I would add to that very powerful response, the centering students' emotional well-being. Parents, they certainly want their children to have emotional well-being, and translanguaging is a big help to help students feel supported, feel confident. And then I think Phoebe and I have been working with this MEC, the multimodalities and textualization cycle. So we do have a stage where only the target language or target genre is used, but then the cycle can keep iterating, so there's no end point. So we are not saying that we will never have a time, a space for pushing the performance in the target language. So it's not either or. So, but you're right, the ideological try to make everything reduce to binary, either or, right? But I think if we talk to parents, your child's emotional well-being should be center stage, right? Yeah. So, but of course, yeah. I mean, it's difficult to work against ideologies. It's sometimes at the unconscious, subconscious level. Chung Hong, you have also some questions? Yes. Mm. 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 Zhongfeng, Mariana, new teachers, you've been working with new teachers.
Zhongfeng, do you want to start this time?
Sure, yeah. I think for new teachers, I think there are many different ways, right? First, I think they should start with themselves to think about what kind of language ideologies they bring to the classroom, especially for new teachers, right? I always say this, it takes a lot of time to unlearn something before you relearn something, right? A lot of times we have to face our own ideological beliefs, and a lot of times these from, we internalize a very harmful native speakerism, monolingual ideologies, right? Taking myself as an example, before I encounter with translanguaging, I internalize a lot of harmful ideologies toward myself, right? Always question, was my English good enough, right? Did I sound like a native speaker? Do I speak with an American accent or British accent? Imitate those standardized language ideology. The certain, I write with an accent. A lot of these times, right? And it takes a lot of time, right? It takes years for me to sort of unlearn the things, right? And to re-embrace the power of translanguaging and to accept who I am, right? So I think for new teachers, usually the first activity I ask them to do is, language portrait, let's say, or think about their own language journey, their own language and literacy autobiography, and try to unpack their ideologies, their own language learning journey. And through this reflexive practices, I think there are many possibilities for us to talk about translanguaging, the power of translanguaging as a theory and the power of translanguaging as a pedagogical approach, right? So I usually start from there, starting from teachers questioning about their own implicit bias and how to further impact ideologies. Because a lot of times, I think the hardest part is your belief system, right? I think like Angel, you just mentioned, changing a person's belief system is the hardest, and it takes a lot of times. Sometimes it even seems like an impossible task, right? Because and they have to be open-minded, right? They also need to grapple with this discomfort a lot of times throughout this process, right? There's also emotional labor involved in this process. And another aspect that I want to emphasize is making sure letting teacher understand that using translanguaging pedagogy needs to be in a systemic, purposeful, and strategic way in their classrooms, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about, translanguaging, teachers may just simply think, then let's just celebrate all different languages in my classroom. Then there will be no time to develop the target language, right? And they will, take it even further, right? Then what's the point of doing translanguaging, right? So it is important that we talk about, translanguaging design, right? We start with translanguaging stance, and then we move to translanguaging design. Intentionally design translanguaging pedagogies in instruction, in assessment. And during this process, we also need to provide them with opportunities to have conversations, reflect on this journey again with each other, within themselves, and with teacher educators, right? So I will just talk about these two aspects for new teachers to embark on their journey of translanguaging. Yeah.
Mariana, yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And often I think too, I find it really fascinating. And this is what I really liked about Yildiz, the quote that I used when I was presenting about a language being a clearly demarcated entity that has a name, is countable as the proxit, while also revealing that group's idiosyncrasies. I thought, wow, I really like that, because I thought that's how people think about language. That's how we think about language. And we separate language and learning. Like we think of learning, and then we think of language, and we do this too by thinking, we're learning a language. So that means, we're thinking about the measuring of how we're learning and the competencies and that. But the language, the actual language, is the learning. It's all mixed up in the learning. And the way that I try to explain it is through objectives. So if you're teaching competency, you're teaching English or Chinese or Korean or any language, and you have to reach these particular benchmarks, they're benchmarks, and that's what you're teaching towards. It's a teaching objective, just like you'd have a teaching objective in biology or in physics or somewhere else. But that's not language, if you're thinking about language in terms of who people are and what they have, and you want to teach them, you need to think about the language and the learning together. And so thinking about translanguaging competencies doesn't really make sense, or thinking about how to measure translanguaging, I think, doesn't really make sense. And that's what I really liked about my second quotation. It aspires to be nowhere in particular. It's only about learning in an educational sense. And this is what really draws me to translanguaging. But it means that teachers need to kind of change the chip of thinking about language, and how they're actually thinking about language is often what's holding them back. And then if they are the teaching objective, this is where I'm trying to go, then they can start explaining it to parents as well. So it doesn't need to be the researcher who comes in and explains to parents. It's the parents understand, oh, okay, so they really want this objective for my child. They're going to get there, and they're thinking the best ways to get there. And the best ways to get there, as far as I can see, is to use the language experiences and the language knowledge of the students, because we know that using background knowledge of students is a bridge to helping them learn new things. So it's just, I know in the Australian context, it's just so invisible what students know. They get asked about what they did on the weekend, and teachers tend to know if they're good at tennis or they're good at ping pong, but they don't know about these language experiences.
Exactly. I want to throw into the discussion this AI discussion. I think in the age of AI is even more important that we value translanguaging, because there are a host of reasons, but I'd like to pick your brain on that. With the introduction of disruptive technology of AI, why translanguaging is even more important? I'm throwing out this question for you.
I'll answer it. I'm very happy to start with this one. I know that Xiangfang knows a lot about this. You've been writing about this, but just to start very, very briefly, I think it's such an opportunity, but it's also a challenge, because it depends how people think about translanguaging. And I think we need to really try to be clear about what we mean with translanguaging, because I know, like in the university context, that people get very worried now that students can just use AI, so they can have something like, in the Australian context, they might, and then translate it all into Chinese, and then get the answer in Chinese, and then translate it all back into English, and then the tutors or the lecturers who don't necessarily share Chinese, and that's not the problem. The problem is not Chinese. The problem is not sharing a language with the students, and then they thinking that they don't need to interact in a particular language anymore, and people are worried about that. So if people see that as translanguaging, then that's a problem. I mean, I think that's a problem for translanguaging. I don't see translanguaging like that at all. I don't think that's translanguaging, because you need to interact, like you need to learn. Like, I see it as an intersection. The real value of translanguaging that I see is the intersection between language and learning, that it provides a really useful, productive intersection. But yeah, so that's my quick answer. I'll hand it over to Xiangfang.
Xiangfang?
Yeah, I think in the age of AI, right, I think it is important that we continue to foster a human-centered approach when we have this relationship with AI, right? A student-centered approach, right? It really centers on student agency. I think then I see the important connections with how we grapple with AI, right? So students, they need to exercise their agency when they interact or engage with AI tools, right? It's not just let AI take over the stage, right? Yes, AI can help us with certain things, right? But it is important that we always exercise human agency on AI, right? We know all kinds of problems with generative AI hallucination, AI creating fake references, AI, the AI produced the essays are very repetitive, and really empty, right? With, not quite a lot of meaningful thoughts. We can easily tell actually which essay is produced by AI, which one is more, written by human, right? I think it is because translanguaging also talks about identity, social emotional well-being, right? Like it is more important, right? When we talk about how we engage with AI from a translanguaging lens, how can we continue to center human agency, human voice, creativity, and criticality? All of these things, I think, are supported by translanguaging this framework, right? And it is, I see all of these can be applicable to AI engagement, right? There's human AI collaboration and what role translanguaging can play in this process. Yeah. So that was my short answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like your answer to look at AI and how to interact and collaborate with AI from a translanguaging lens. I actually wrote this paper with Tsinghua, the 4T lenses. So how to look at AI, how to collaborate with AI from 4T lenses, including translanguaging lens, trans-semiotizing lens, trans-knowledging lens. That's Catherine Hill from University of South Australia, trans-knowledging lens, and the transculturing lens. As you said, AI is full of cultural and knowledge, epistemic, linguistic biases. So from the 4T lenses, looking at AI, including the translanguaging lens, yes. So you have any questions from our question bank? Any other questions submitted by our colleagues? And I don't have any questions from the YouTube audience yet. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Mm.
Can I just ask, in what sense? So, with the graduate research student, are they teaching? Do they have a teaching background, or are they thinking about it as a researcher and they would like to collaborate with teachers? How are they thinking about it? One thing I can say is that we thought with my with PhD students and I, we got together and we formed our website, the Leveraging Languages for Learning website, and that's really to try to give voice and have a community of practice and invite people in to talk and. Both, Angel and Shangfang have both been very kind enough to be on the website as well. But so this idea really of giving voice and networking, and the fact too that often it's not. I mean, academic publications are extremely important, very, very important, but also it's not the only way to show your knowledge. So, for example, if you're writing, you're in your PhD all the time, and that's a very academic piece of work, but then you can take parts of your PhD and you can share them more generally with the public. And that can get people interested in your research as well, more generally. So really, that's the idea of writing blog entries and inviting them, that kind of thing. So that's something that we're doing. And if anybody would like to get in contact, we'd be very happy to see what they're doing. And if they'd like to write for the website, we'd be very happy.
Yeah. So I think I will just add that there are actually different ways that graduate students can form their own communities. So I think, like, for example, AAAL, I think they specifically have a graduate student council, or I cannot remember the exact name correctly, right? Like that they work together, they produce newsletters together, and they even interview senior researchers. So a lot of these opportunities, I think graduate students can put themselves out there and get involved and started to establish, their network little by little, right? So I was a graduate student before, not too long ago, right? Like, so now I'm moving toward the other end, right? As a professor, I started to mentor, emerging scholars, graduate students, right? Yeah. So I think so I always see graduate students as future colleagues, not just as students, right? Like they could bring so much to to the table, right? They have their their innovative ideas, they are grappling with some new methodologies, right? So I think their contribution should be really valued equally or in an equitable way, right? But I think it is important that to explore different ways through professional organizations. For example, if you are thinking to form like peer supporting networks, writing groups to support each other, attending conferences, right? Reach out to your peers, right? Seeing what are some like-minded folks doing similar research projects in your area, right? And can don't feel shy, right? Have a coffee, or a quick lunch with them. So a lot of times, organic relationships starting from there, right? Like so I think those are different ways. Yeah, the graduate student can start build their networks. Yeah.
I could see that, Zhongfeng, you embody that spirit, such a team builder and a team player. I think it is this community, we are doing it together, that helps to sustain us. And the next generation, the graduate students, are actually the most important members of our communities, because our future depends on you, not on us. Okay. So
Can I say too, just one thing, sorry to add to that, Angela. I was just thinking too that it can be difficult for graduate research students to initiate, to do it themselves, if there are people that you can identify as helping with that and then growing. So for example, with this website, it's not only PhD students now it's colleagues, it's ex-PhD students, people who are already, in their academics already. And, so if you have a little bit of an ally there to try to help lift something, and then you can help to grow it. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just all about the graduate research student having to, go out there and do it themselves, because that can be very daunting. It can be difficult.
Yes, it is. It has to be about this cross-generational community. So that's also why we set up this TLTS research space, so that we have different generations of researchers coming into this journal. Yeah. But I can understand the challenges facing our younger generation. So that's why our translanguaging communities, researchers work, like what you're doing, it's very important to involve the grad students and the teachers. And so thank both Mariana and Zhongfeng again, and also bringing in the presentations of your colleagues. I think it's just the beginning. There's so much work to do, especially in terms of how to tackle monolingual assessment, right? And which has washback effect. And that's also making teachers so reluctant to embrace translanguaging. So those of us here are, I'm working with a group of scholars to work on ecological languaging competencies, ELC, and to be really ecologically authentic, we will be translanguaging. And we also want to advance the idea of the so-called monolingual is a myth. Even you think you are just speaking English or just speaking Chinese monolingually. Basically, you are also shifting in and out of different styles, different registers, different ways of speaking. So there's no strictly speaking monolingual speaker, because even though you think you're just monolingual English, you're actually trans-registering, trans-styling. And so the trans is a dynamic point of view. And there's both theoretical work that we need to do, and Mariana has been doing that. And there's also the practice-oriented together with teacher. Actually, the two will mutually support each other You cannot just do theory in an armchair, and you cannot just do practice without thinking deeply about these very ontological, theoretical issues that we actually, when we actually in this world, we don't just speak with one voice and with one code and with one style and with one language. So, so if we can normalize this dynamic translanguaging view, trans-semiotizing view, trans-styling, JLMT and I come up with the trans-featuring, because we are, if you want to say, we are actually the so-called academic language of everyday language. All these are just reductionaries. You're speaking academic language, you're speaking everyday language, or you're speaking language A, you're speaking language B. It's all is fossilization as your quote. So I can see both theoretical and practice oriented. Yeah. Oh, someone, Saskia. So I'm wondering if you, Saskia in the audience, in YouTube, if you can say more about how current translanguaging perspectives take into account holistic understandings of multilingualism from the global South. Okay, global South. So maybe we answer that question first. Okay, over to you, Marianne and Zhongfeng.
I was just thinking it's a shame that Robin couldn't join us. We have to do this again. Well, not necessarily, but we have to, like, because with this group, we're hoping to do more, you know, but it was going to be about 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning for them. We just thought it was a little bit too much. But that's a really important question. I don't know. I don't feel really equipped. I feel like in Australia, the context of Australia, I'm just really, I think someone like Robin, that's what she has to think about all the time in her context. So it's a very, very important question, but I feel that I would perhaps not do it justice. I also feel that it's difficult. I would really like to, we have actually had in one of our projects, we had an Indigenous girl in the class, and it was really great. Like, it worked really well, but it was relationship. There was a really good relationship. We can't, but it's difficult to mix in Australia with Indigenous education. We need to build it from the ground up. For reasons, for, you know, logical reasons, you know, and we really want to make sure that we do research with Indigenous people if we are doing research on Indigenous people. So there's a real push towards that, which I totally 100% agree with. So unless, you know, we have the opportunity to form real collaborative partnerships with Indigenous people, then we think, well, we shouldn't be doing the research. So that is something that it happened just kind of organically, where we had this girl in the research, and it was wonderful to see what happened. But yes, because it needs to be in a certain way. So yeah, that's my comment on it, really.
Zhongfeng?
Sure, yeah. So I think, to me, translanguaging has always, the roots of translanguaging has always been tied to the global South, the Southern perspectives, right? Because if you think about it, translanguaging theory is about to, and practice and pedagogy is about to empower language minoritized, racialized communities, right? To really leverage their voices, and to really empower who they are, bring their full selves into the dominant spaces, right? So a lot of times, because global South is not just about geographical boundaries, right? With certain areas, you know, being referred to global South. It is more about, to me, it is more about you know, whose knowledge is valued or is silenced in this space, right? And translanguaging is to bring those, you know, is about rejecting the abyssal thinking, right? As the Garcia et al. 2021, the article they talk about, right? So it's about, I think the decolonial agenda of translanguaging is really important, and it shouldn't be diluted as we talk about translanguaging, right? Because and so whose knowledge systems are being valued or privileged in this space, and how can we bring those invisible to the visible level? So I think are really important. This is why also translanguaging and it's also about transknowledging, right? About bringing those indigenous ways of knowing, thinking, being into the dominant spaces, right? It's not about assimilation, students from the non-dominant groups to us being assimilated into the dominant groups, right? It's about leveraging their knowledges and seeing their knowledge as resources, right? And sustain their ways of knowing, thinking, and being in classrooms, in different spaces. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents, right? I think translanguage has always has this deep roots with Global South, and we need to continue to make sure center the Southern perspectives in translanguaging agenda as we continue to grapple with these monolingual ideologies, those different myths surrounding translanguaging, and make sure social justice is also centered in translanguaging scholarship. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think.
Sorry, Andrew.
Mariana, yes.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add to that. I thought that was really important. I just wanted to add, though, that I wonder. I was I just co-edited a book for the Australian context, Multilingualism as Opportunity, and I was engaging with Indigenous understandings of language for that book. And I think one thing that we do have to be careful with is not to overlay. Not to put our understandings of what translanguaging is onto different kinds of understandings of language, because then, it's not fair to them. And also we miss the opportunity to learn from them. Yes. It's almost like we're still telling them, this is okay, what you do is translate. No, we're telling them that, but what if we just kind of need to take a step back and listen a little bit and think, okay, well, what is this? And it is, and the more I sat with it, the more I thought, wow, this is such a different way of thinking about language. And I found it really interesting. So that's another reason I just feel, we have to respect it and not necessarily overlay things. Sorry, Angel, I interrupted you.
Yeah, that's very important. Yeah, I was just thinking of Kathleen Hill's work at University of South Australia. Okay, and also there is some pushback because they see translanguaging as coming from the north, from the global north. And it's just, Mariana, just as you said, we don't want to, we need to learn and we need to keep deepening the theorizing, conceptualizing of translanguaging, because it is evolving the theory. And why it has been critique as coming from the north, that we have some deep reflection on it, because the context that translanguaging studies are done is usually in Europe, in the UK, in North America. So so that might give people that idea, and the principles also coming from the north. The scholars also coming from the north, right? So yeah, Mariana, what you say is so true. I mean, is we need to always be very critically reflexive on our own positionality. That scholars from the global south feeling that, here is just another theory coming from the north, even including translanguaging theory, right? Because it's come from the context from the north, global north. And then now you're saying that we need to listen to your theory. So I hear that, and I do feel that we need to be very mindful of our positionality, just as what you said, Mariana. Yeah. So with that, I think thank you again. It has been an hour and a half, and we still have quite a number of colleagues at the YouTube channel. So thank you for those who stayed with us all through the 90 minutes. So thank you again. I think it's just the beginning, and we have this community and cross-generation community. So maybe before we say goodbye, just from Chung Hong, and then everybody say something before we say goodbye. Chung Hong, yeah. Yeah, Mariana.
Thank you. It's been lovely. It's just wonderful to be able to talk about these things in a cross-contextual way and to learn, to get ideas. I found the other talks very thought-provoking for myself. Thank you so much for having us here. It's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, Zhongfeng.
Yeah, so I think I would just say translanguaging survives and thrives in communities. So I think let's continue to cultivate this community dialogues, and yeah, so this is very important, and I'm very grateful to be part of this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So with this note on the importance of community, please, those of us who are with us, please join our TLTF's community by subscribing to the channel and pressing the button so that you get all the future notifications. And we must invite Robin and other scholars to come back to talk about this topic at a time that's convenient for them. Okay. Okay. So with that, thanks again. Thanks everybody on the YouTube channel. Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.